flashes of memory.
About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the foo? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid, but he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way. And this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see a stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high, he looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. A group of friends was staying at this remote cabin that one of my friend's cousins owned. There were no roads leading to the cabin, and it was a good 3-4 day hike from where you parked the cars. I couldn't go at the same time as everyone else due to work obligations, so I decided to head up the same day but later. It would mean I would have to camp for a night by myself though. The latter part of the trail is too dangerous to be taken at night, especially by someone who doesn't know it. I didn't care, I was kind of looking forward to it as I've never camped alone before. So I was in the middle of these woods when the sun went down. I got my camp set up in this small clearing, probably 40 feet across. Get my campfire going and pitch my small one-person tent. Do all that camping stuff like cooking hot dogs on a stick over the fire and s'mores. I probably stay up for a good 2 or 3 hours after dark. It was mid-autumn, so the days were somewhat short. The entire time I thought I heard shit moving in the woods on the edge of the clearing. I didn't think anything of it at first because the woods are full of animals. But as the night went on, I realized that whatever it was just circling the clearing over and over. Once I started paying attention, it made 4 or 5 laps around before I decided to get up and investigate. The noise stopped as soon as I stooped up, and I thought I heard some sounded going away through the woods. I just shrugged it off, thinking it was some fox that was curious that got scared when I stood up. I decide it's time to sleep, douse the fire and climb into my tent. I start to doze off and stay in that half-asleep, half-awake state for a while. I normally hear weird shit when I'm in this state, so I don't think much of it when I hear a voice. Something wakes me all the way up though, and I realize the voice is real and right outside my tent. It's just above a whisper, and I'm not sure if it was another language or if they were just speaking English in such a way that I couldn't understand. I lay there for some time, I don't know how long, listening and waiting for something to happen. There's just enough moonlight to light up the walls of the tent, so I can see when a hand presses into the wall of my tent down near my foot. This freaks me out and I sit up quickly. Whoever was outside of the tent tore ass out of there, like running full sprint through the woods. I get out of the tent and shine my flashlight around and see nothing. I was expecting there to be a bloody handprint on the tent, but nope. Didn't sleep that night. Packed up camp at first light that morning and booked it to the cabin. It's no secret that I drink. My friends will make jokes like, "Your idea of a balanced diet is a beer in both hands." I'll laugh with them, but I don't miss their pitying smirks. When I'm out to have a good time though, and when I'm in, well, either way, it feels like I'm only smiling once I've knocked back a few. I have this weird habit when I'm drinking alone where I like to watch myself get drunk in the mirror. I start off by seeing this drab, aging, overweight slob, and I'll make a game out of drinking until he looks happy. I'll grin and make faces and watch myself laugh. and wonder why I can't be like this all the time. I can steal a few hours from reality until my girlfriend gets home from work and we start to bicker. And then everything that didn't exist a moment before is suddenly there again. The second she walks in the door and sees that I've been drinking, the smile disappears from the mirror. Usually we'll have a discussion, although she's the only one talking, so I tend to think of it as a lecture instead. Sometimes she'll give up and let it go, but then there are cases like the other night where she works herself into some kind of frenzy. I guess I'd forgotten to pick her up. I knew it was my fault and I apologized. But it didn't matter. Nothing I said got through to her anymore. It was like she couldn't even hear me. And she just kept getting louder and louder until all the words morphed into one long angry blast, not ceasing until the door slammed behind her. It was just me in the mirror after that, so I took another drink and watched it smile. A big sloppy smile too, as wide as I'd ever seen, stretching my face into a caricature of itself. It would have been heartwarming to see if I really had been smiling. I turned my head slowly from side to side, watching the mirror from my peripheral vision. The man in the mirror turned too, matching my movements exactly, giving me a full view of all its leering teeth. Meanwhile, I felt my own closed mouth with my hand just to be sure. The mirror was smiling, but I wasn't. That unnerved the hell out of me. It was a wake-up call. I emptied the rest of my bottle down the sink and went to lie down for a while. The weird thing was that I didn't feel that drunk, though. I was walking straight, thinking clearly. I was barely even buzzed. Lying there in the dark and thinking about what happened wasn't any better. I felt like I was going to start sobbing. After about an hour of tossing and turning and hating myself, I got up to use the bathroom and looked in the mirror again. I wanted to see myself smile, even if it wasn't real, just to know that it was still possible. I was even soberer than last time. I could feel the miserable weight of it. My reflection, though? A coy dimple at first, but before my eyes it was stretching into a beaming grin. I felt my slack, loose face again with both hands. Then reaching out to touch the smile in the mirror, my hand tensed into a rigid claw. I didn't feel glass. I felt the warm, moist, tightly pulled lip, the stubble of its face, the curve of its chin, my hand slipping through the mirror as though it wasn't even there. I wasn't afraid exactly, more mesmerized by something so far beyond my understanding. Then when my reflection turned to walk away, it felt like part of me was leaving with it. It was just me in the mirror after that. So I took another drink and watched it smile. A big sloppy smile too, as wide as I'd ever seen, stretching my face into a caricature of itself. It would have been heartwarming to see if I really had been smiling. I turned my head slowly from side to side, watching the mirror from my peripheral vision. The man in the mirror turned too, matching my movements exactly, giving me a full view of all its leering teeth. Meanwhile, I felt my own closed mouth with my hand just to be sure. The mirror was smiling, but I wasn't. I watched myself exit the bathroom on the other side of the glass. Now the mirror showed an empty bathroom, my reflection gone. I touched the glass again and felt the cold, smooth surface. I was about to try and sleep whatever this was off, but then I heard the door open. She's back. She changed her mind. Suddenly, the mirror didn't matter anymore. I raced through my apartment faster than a kid on Christmas morning, stumbling to a halt when I reached the living room. It was empty. The door was locked. No one had entered. But then I heard her voice. "Look, I know I said I wasn't coming back, but..." Her voice was coming from behind me, sounding muffled, almost as though she was speaking underwater. I raced back to the bathroom, the mirror still empty of my reflection. I was beginning to think it was another hallucination when I heard, "I'm so sorry. I'm going to be a new man from now on, I promise." My own voice, coming from inside the mirror. It was muffled too, seemingly a long way off. But even if my reflection had left its bathroom and gone to its version of my living room, how could my girlfriend have entered that living room instead of my own? "You do look different somehow," she said. "I can't quite put my finger on it." Unless, of course, I had changed places with my reflection somehow. If he was in my real living room and I was behind the mirror. "Did you do something with your hair? It's usually parted the other way," she added. "I'm just happy to see you, that's all," my voice said. "I guess you're not used to seeing me smile." "Maybe you're right. It's a good change." I'd climbed onto the counter at this point. An inch from the glass, but still no reflection. I mapped the entire surface with my hands, then harder, pounding my fists against the mirror, watching the whole pane rattle against the wall. "Hello, can anyone hear me?" I shouted. If they could, they made no sign. I heard them talking softly for a while, then she started to laugh. I don't remember the last time I heard her laugh. I was getting desperate by this point. I wanted to smash the mirror to pieces, but I was afraid that would block my only route home. I sprinted back to the living room, threw open the door, searching for something. Anything to make sense out of this madness. I didn't make it far before I heard her scream, though, and I felt compelled to run back and see what was going on. My heart leaped when I saw my reflection again in the bathroom mirror. He was still smiling, even humming to himself while he washed his hands in the sink, washing the blood from his hands. I couldn't hold myself back anymore. I threw my whole body against the mirror. It exploded on impact, splintering shards of shrapnel showing 1,000 bloody hands which rained around me. I didn't stop, hurling myself again and again into the empty frame, smashing and driving each fragment of glass into my hands until there was nothing left but diamond dust. I was heaving for breath when I walked back into the living room. My real living room. I know it was real because I saw her on the couch, her throat and mouth cleanly slit from end to end, smiling wider than she ever had when she was with me. I took my keys and my wallet, and I ran, leaving everything else behind for good. The police caught up with me about a week later. They interviewed me and took prints, but apparently the ones on the knife didn't match me. They were completely backward, in fact. I haven't had a drink since that day, but God knows I've wanted to. I guess I'm just too afraid to look in a mirror one day and see myself smile. Thanks for listening to this Stories to the End. Every Wednesday and Sunday, Flashes of Memory publishes a new story.